Two prominent Americans, U.S. Marine Trevor and WNBA star Brittney Griner, are stuck in Russian prisons tonight on what appear to be trumped-up charges. It must be maddening for the families to feel so helpless. But what I don't understand is what can possibly be done right now to pressure Vladimir Putin to act, considering everything else that's going on. We'll talk in a moment to the man who led the efforts to release hostages under President Trump to tell us what I could be missing. Reed has been jailed in Russia since August 2019. He was convicted in 2020 of assaulting a Russian police officer and sentenced to 9 years in jail. He says he was drunk on the night in question and doesn't remember what happened. His family has accused Russian officials of making up the charges to use him as a bargaining chip with the U.S. The 30-year-old's family has publicly pleaded for help from the government for some time. Yesterday, his parents met with President Biden after weeks of waiting, including several days of demonstrating outside the White House itself. They hope the president will do more to bring Trevor home amid Putin's invasion of Ukraine and have become increasingly public with their pressure campaign in hopes of convincing the president to act.
It appears that a lot of the problem all along has been our own government. It's been people at the highest levels not wanting to make a trade or deal with Putin at all while our loved ones are dying in Russian gulags.
Now, I can't imagine their suffering. But what I don't get is what could actually be done now. Now, Reed's family says they've had little contact with him since his arrest. According to reports, the family spoke with him earlier this month for the first time in more than 200 days. They're worried that he's sick, possibly with tuberculosis, and that he may have begun a second hunger strike to protest his treatment by the Russians. He'd refused food for 6 days in November to protest his detention and violation of his human rights. Griner, one of the greatest women basketball players of all time, was arrested on a drug charge in February. Russian customs officials claim they found vape cartridges that contained a marijuana concentrate in her luggage at a Moscow area airport. She could face up to 10 years in a Russian prison if she's found guilty. She was returning to Russia to rejoin the professional team she was playing for in the Russian league. The Griner's camp is taking a different approach than the Reed family, reportedly urging WNBA players and other people associated with Griner not to speak out about her status, worried that increased visibility could make her a bigger bargaining chip for Putin's regime. Here's Basketball Hall of Famer Lisa Leslie discussing it on I Am Athlete podcast last week.
What we were told was to not make a big fuss about it so that they could not use her as a pawn, so to speak, in this situation in the war. Don't make it where like free Brittney and we start this campaign, right, and then it becomes something that they could use
as leverage.
But in recent days, the calls for the White House to do more to bring Griner home have also begun to grow louder. Former New Mexico governor and U.S. ambassador to the UN, Bill Richardson, has been part of a group working to secure Reed's release, but told us that his group can't comment on the status of those efforts at this time. Here's the thing. U.S. officials have called on Moscow to release Griner and Reed, as well as American executive Paul Whelan, who is serving a 16-year sentence on espionage charges that his family and the U.S. government say are false. Even if we assume that Griner, Reed, and Whelan are all truly innocent, we can't get Russia to stop killing innocent civilians in Ukraine. So how could we get them to release these Americans during these hostilities? Joining me now is someone who knows a lot about this, Hugh Dugan, who served in the Trump administration as the acting special presidential envoy for hostage affairs. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. To an outsider, it would seem hopeless, right? Reportedly, the Russians aren't even speaking to their military counterparts in the United States. So is there anything that is different about this sort of communication that could offer some hope?
Well, the hope that we have is that these people are being held by a government with which we have relations. Now, if they were held by a terrorist group or some non-state actor, we wouldn't be able to negotiate with them under our law. But since they are held by a government, we don't actually technically refer to them as hostages, but wrongfully detained, wrongful detainees. So there is a very, very thin sliver of hope around this dark cloud that, in fact, we do have an open dialogue opportunity with the government with which we have diplomatic relations, although they are extremely strained right now.
Let me ask you, Reed was arrested while you were in office there. What can you tell us, if anything, about what your office could do to try to bring him home? Obviously, I don't want you to disclose or mention anything that could hurt the efforts now, and I know you wouldn't. But is there anything in its broadest sense that you can tell us about what happened at that point?
Well, yes, I don't want to say or do anything that might compromise efforts underway. I've not
Understood.
been following this closely in the last many months, so I don't want to do anything like that. But just to speak more contextually, it has to be an all-of-government approach. And this was not available until President Trump came to office, when there was devised a major all-of-government approach with the creation of my office and the creation of a hostage fusion cell at the FBI that takes agents from all the different agencies in government to sit every day and ponder each and every case. Now, this led us to the resolution of several dozen hostage or wrongfully detainee cases. And I should preface everything by saying that when you've seen one hostage case, you've seen only one hostage case. Each one is so distinct, so different. Right. And as you mentioned in the opening.
I'm sorry, I apologize for interrupting you. I was just thinking as you were saying that about how each case is different. And I know you do want to be careful, and I completely understand that about giving specifics. But there are two different strategies being employed here. Reed's parents increasingly vocal. Brittney Griner's team saying, we don't want to talk about this. Is there a right strategy?
No, there's no one good strategy. It's such a moving target on all accounts. The perpetrators of the crime have their own calculations that can change on a whim, of which we may not be aware, and based on their national interests. Our interests may change. Our capacity is limited greatly, and to some extent, it's almost invisible in many cases. So there's no one right way, but it is fair to say that the more publicity given could generate more value in holding that hostage. And the less publicity might enable a bit more of a sophisticated, subtle, face-saving effort to extricate everybody from the problem. And that's a basic principle to bear in mind, although I can understand fully the family's frustrations. I met with many family. Our hostage effort under President Trump reached out to the families like never before. We had them at the State Department. For an entire day of programming with the Secretary of State, and many of them went to the White House to visit Vice President Pence and President Trump, whose door was always open to them. So it's shocking to hear that this family had to protest in Lafayette Square for several days before getting noticed by the special presidential envoy for hostage affairs. There are very few presidential envoys in history. There are only about 10. And this one is dedicated to hostage affairs. It says that the president has put his name on the line. He's not going to pass the buck to his bureaucracy. But to hear that they had trouble seeing him is very disconcerting to me.
But I would assume, right, that there are people who have been captured and are sitting in prisons around the world, right, in different places. And I would assume that the president can't meet with every single one of them. I'm not saying and therefore anything about this particular instance, but I'm certain that that's the case. But let me ask you this: initially I came into this feeling like this is totally hopeless, right? And I was thinking, gosh, is this even worth doing a segment on? And I have to tell you, the one thing that gave me hope, and I want you to tell me if I'm reading too much into this. The one thing that gave me hope is that Reed's parents were able to speak to him for the first time in months recently. That would seem to me to at least be something that says they're not just shutting everything down and shutting everything off.
That's a milestone. And when we have lines of effort in each hostage case, we seek out those type of milestones. Proof of life is one of them. Are they even still alive? Proof of their ability to communicate and capacity to communicate to their captors. And certainly having real-time interaction with them, be it phone or in person or with family or anyone else, is a major milestone as well. So these are markers that we try to assess. So I agree that is a glimmer of hope. But then again, it may just be fool's gold. And at least we know he's alive. He's able to communicate, and that's all we really know about the Russian intent. I have to say, I was somewhat worried this week when we had this American astronaut out in outer space at the behest of the Russians. And my instinct was, are they going to hold him hostage? Frankly, that would have been the most graphic, ugly type of hostage holding. And the fact that they brought him back, I don't want to give them credit for doing the right thing, but they might not have. And they brought him back, and that showed, perhaps we're reading a lot into that in terms of Putin's ability to be human once in a while. I don't know. But each and every one of these markers gives us an insight into their intent and their capacity to alter things. And right now, the context. Please.
That's a great point. That's a great point about the astronaut, actually. And again, looking for those small little glimmers that could lead to some sort of solutions. All right, Hugh Dugan, thank you so much for coming on the show and taking the time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.